In the aftermath of humanity's golden age of expansion, Earth found itself more isolated than ever. The Interstellar Accord, once a proud multi-species coalition founded on diplomacy, exploration, and mutual understanding, had long since fractured. After the Unity War, where ideological splits between human colonies and alien allies escalated into devastating conflicts, most factions withdrew into silence. The stars, once teeming with collaboration, had gone quiet. The Accord was dead. Dream was buried. Humanity had turned inward. Captain Arya Voss was born into this new Aegean era of suspicion, disconnection, and cold pragmatism. She was an oddity, trained as a diplomat in a world that no longer valued diplomacy. The Terran Diplomatic Corps was little more than a ceremonial vestige of a bygone era, and she was its last graduate. Most saw her education as a waste linguistics, Zen psychology, conflict resolution, useless skills when survival now depended on trade monopolies and military deterrence. But Arya didn't believe the dream was dead. When a mysterious signal pulsed through the edge of the Kuiper Araj, a flicker buried beneath radiation noise, no one cared. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't valuable, and it wasn't human. Earth Command dismissed it as pre-collapse static, the afterimage of a dead civilization. But Arya knew better. The signal was coded a form of ancient Concord standard, diplomatic language that hadn't been used since the Accord's fall. Its structure was unmistakable. She decoded the fragment herself. A simple message, repeated over and over. Unity possible. Seek peace. Awaiting response. That was enough for her, against the objections of Earth's leadership, against the jeers of broadcast analysts, and without the support of the Terran Navy, Arya volunteered to follow the signal. She requested the Vigil's reach, a long-retired Concorde-class diplomatic vessel mothballed in Mars orbit. It was unarmed, slow by modern standards, and barely spaceworthy. Its databanks, however, held every Accord treaty, negotiation record. In cultural archives still known to humanity, it was all she needed. With only a skeleton support crew to help launch her, Arya slipped out of Lunar Gate Station in silence. No ceremony, no farewell. She vanished into the void dash alone. Her mission was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution. Locate the origin of the signal, determine its source, and attempt peaceful contact with whoever sent it. But what made her mission truly revolutionary was not the difficulty, it was the intent. She wasn't going to establish trade routes, seize territory, or gather intelligence. She was going to ask a question that no one had dared ask in over a century. Can we heal what was? Broken. The journey was harrowing. Past Pluto, the Cums relay towers faded. Beyond the Oort cloud, even black box data relays ceased. Arya crossed into uncharted space with no connection to Earth, no allies, no chance of rescue. But she wasn't afraid. Within her, Arya carried a deep, unshakable belief that peace was still possibly then, if everyone else had given up. She believed that the galaxy had not always been defined by conquest, that there had been a time when species sought understanding, not supremacy. And though those ideals had crumbled, they had not disappeared completely. Each day aboard the Vigil's reach, she studied the signal, rechecking her translations. She read ancient Accord texts, rehearsed diplomatic protocols that hadn't been used in generations, and adjusted the ship's linguistic AI to parse forgotten dialects. It was a journey not just across space, but across memory, across legacy, as she entered what ancient star maps labeled simply the Shattered Reach, a dead zone left behind after the Unity War. Arya saw no ships, no beacons, no civilizations, just drifting husks of war. Giant stations torn open like tin cans. Silent satellites orbiting long-dead planets. But through the darkness, the signal continued. Stronger now, clearer, and one line changed everything. Human presence detected. Unity. Still possible? Please come. The message was waiting for her. Arya Voss, the last Terran diplomat, had ventured into the void alone, and something was calling her forward. Not for war. Not for conquest, but for peace. And she would answer. End of Part 1 explanation? Captain Arya Voss crossed into the unknown with little more than her convictions and an aging diplomatic ship beneath her feet. The void she sailed into was not empty, it was broken. It bore the scars of 1,000 forgotten wars, the relics of dead alliances, and the quiet hum of satellites repeating messages to civilizations that no longer existed. After weeks of carefully following the signal through this scarred region, Arya arrived at a solar system marked only in pre-collapsed archives as System Epsilon 9. No Terran maps labeled it anymore. Orbiting its primary star were ancient megastructures, some intact, others twisted and shattered from battle. Energy signatures flickered faintly across the dark, but no ships greeted her. No broadcasts welcomed her. Then her ship's comms detected 3 different signals, 3 dialects, each layered into the repeating message. Not one civilization, but 3. Arya had stumbled into the aftermath of what had once been a galactic nexus, now fractured into warring or isolated factions. The 3 civilizations here, though physically close, had not spoken in centuries. The Krell, Dominion and Insectoid, hyperlogical race that thrived on data, structure, and order. They had once served as the record keepers and technocrats of the Concord, maintaining the archives and legal frameworks of interstellar law. After the collapse, the Krell withdrew from diplomacy entirely, retreating to secure vault worlds and silencing all external transmissions. They viewed the galaxy as too chaotic, too unstable to trust. The Heliari clan's beings of living plasma, born from star forges and nebular storms, brilliant and volatile, the Heliari were once artists, philosophers, and warriors. But the Concords. Fall fractured them into roving nomadic fleets, each ruled by a matron voice. Passion ruled their cultural alliances made or broken through spectacle, emotion, and force. They remembered betrayal deeply and did not forgive easily. The Talaran continuum, once considered the soul of the Concord. The Talarans were a deeply telepathic and empathic species who acted as mediators and spiritual guides. After suffering catastrophic loss during the Unity War, nearly 80% of their population, they had become reclusive. Their society fragmented and grieving. They communicated mostly through dreamlike broadcasts, and their contact with others was minimal. Arya's first challenge was simply making contact. She broadcast carefully crafted diplomatic packets to each race, encoded in languages drawn from the Concord archives. She used neutral phrases, sonoring their histories, acknowledging the pain of the past, and offering no demands, only dialogue. The Krell responded first, not with words, but by dispatching a data drone to scan her ship and observe her behavior. Cold and calculating, they wanted proof. Why was a human in this space? What did she gain? The Heliari answered with a test of courage. A matron voice named Vashara challenged her to a direct communication relay, a duel of words and will. Broadcast across the solar system, Arya accepted. With calm clarity, she told them Earth had not come to conquer, nor to bargain but to listen. Her courage and restraint impressed them. The Talarans remained silent. But on the 6th day, while Arya slept aboard Vigil's Reach, she awoke to strange dreams not her own. Memories, emotions, and voices not hers. A gentle presence. They were watching. Eventually, all 3 factions agreed to private audiences, separate and cautious, in Krell space. She spoke before the High Data Forum, explaining the message she'd followed and reminding them of Concord laws still archived. Within her ship's systems, to her surprise, the Krell hadn't destroyed those records. They'd preserved them too. To the Heliari, aboard a blazing cruiser carved from molten asteroid metal, she told stories of humanity's own wars and recoveries. She showed them music from Earth, stories of Terran poets who wrote peace from the ashes of devastation. With the Talaran, it was different. There were no meetings, only moments of mental clarity, shared emotions, images of Earth's rebirth, and glimpses of Arya's memories as a child watching old Accord missions in the ruins of an embassy. Eventually, a message appeared in her mind. We will listen. The real miracle wasn't the contact. It was the realization that they all wanted peace, in some deep part of themselves. The Concord hadn't been destroyed because peace was impossible, but because it had been betrayed. Each faction still carried the wound of that betrayal, and each had waited hope that someone would reach out, but no one ever did. Until Arya. She hadn't come on behalf of Earth's interests. She hadn't brought a fleet or demands. She had brought understanding. She had learned their histories, their languages, their wounds, and that made her different. She was not a diplomat of a nation. She was a human who came alone, and in a galaxy full of fear. That was more powerful than any empire. For a moment, it seemed like the impossible had begun. Captain Arya Voss had succeeded where centuries of silence had prevailed. She'd opened direct lines of communication between the Krell, the Heliari, and the Tallaren III ancient civilizations. Once bound by the old galactic concord, now isolated by distrust and grief. After her initial contact, all three agreed tentatively to participate in a preliminary peace summit. It was to be held on the neutral moon of Vera III, a cold, barren, a world that once housed a Concord arbitration site. Its ruins were symbolic. If peace were to be reborn, Arya believed it should happen on the bones of what was lost. Each delegation would send 3 representatives, no soldiers.
No ships in orbit.
Just diplomatic observers and 1 secure broadcast line to their homeworlds. Arya's ship, Vigil's Reach, would serve as the center of operations, transmitting peace proceedings to all parties. The moon itself would host the first formal dialogue between the species. In 140 years, Arya worked tirelessly preparing the summit. With assistance from the Krell, she constructed a neutral digital protocol for communications to ensure transparency. The Heliari helped power the old Concord relay towers using their living ship's energy cores. The Tallaren, quiet as ever, provided the architecture of the summit's flow-staggered speaking turns, emotional synchrony techniques, and shared empathy windows. Hope stirred. But as the summit date approached, something began to feel off. Interference buzzed intermittently through her communications array. The Krell flagged unidentified bursts of encrypted data near the system's edge. The Heliari dismissed it pirate remnants. Perhaps. Arya wasn't convinced. Then the attack came. Just 3 hours before the summit's start, a fleet dropped out of FTL above Vera III. No insignias, no diplomacy, no warning. The orbital satellites captured the silhouettes of jagged warships sold, brutal, and designed for nothing but destruction. The Urek. They were the remnants of a 4th, was thought to have gone extinct after the fall of the Concord. Unlike the Krell or Tallaren, the Urek had thrived in chaos. A predatory species that once acted as mercenaries and war profiteers, they had never believed in peace. When the Concord fell, the Urek splintered into warbands, hiding in deep space and feeding off the fractured galactic order. Now they had returned, and peace was a threat to their survival. The summit venue was the first target. A focused kinetic strike from orbit vaporized half of the landing zone. The Krell delegation's transport was shredded mid-descent. The Heliari envoy shuttle crash-landed, sending plasma arcing across the ruins. The Tallaren simply disappeared, vanished into psionic null space the moment the attack began. Arya was aboard the Vigil's Reach, monitoring final preparations when the first impact hit. Her ship shuddered, systems flickering. Smoke filled the air. She barely managed to reboot the primary comms to issue an emergency broadcast to the 3 delegations. But instead of retreating, she acted. She launched the Vigil's Reach into low orbit, not to flee, but to rescue. With manual controls overriding half the ship's damaged AI, she located the Heliari survivors through thermal tracking and extended a docking corridor across the shattered moon's surface. 2 Heliari diplomats staggered aboard, scorched and barely alive. She didn't stop there. Krell, emergency protocols. Pinged a faint distress signal from a crashed transport module half buried in moon dust. Despite warnings from the remaining Heliari, Arya descended alone in an EVA suit, crossed a debris field under Urek sniper fire, and pulled a Krell archivist out of the wreckage. 1 diplomat from each race, rescued not by a warship, not by soldiers, but by a human who had come with no weapons and no backup. When she returned to orbit, the Urek fleet began a system-wide broadcast. Their voice was synthesized and mechanical, but the message was clear. You bring weakness. Unity is a lie. The stars belong to those who take them. The old fear began to rise again among the delegations. The Heliari demanded vengeance. The Krell wanted to retreat. The Talaran, who finally reappeared in Arya's dreams, sent only one haunting message. The wound reopens. Arya stood before all three, bleeding, exhausted, her voice trembling, but she didn't give up. She addressed them in their own languages, one after another. She reminded the Krell of the Accord's first principles order, built through trust, not isolation. She reminded the Heliari that revenge only fed the fire they claimed to despise. And she told the Talaran what she had learned from Earth's worst wars. Peace doesn't survive on its own. It must be protected. Even in fire, the delegations listened, and slowly and believably they agreed to continue. The summit was gone, the moon was burning, but the idea, the dream, survived. Because one human refused to let it die. The attack on Vir 3 should have ended everything. 3 civilizations had come together for the first time in over a century, only to be met with fire. The Urek fleet's surprise assault destroyed the summit site, killed multiple envoys, and nearly silenced the hope Arya boss had spent months nurturing, but it didn't. It galvanized them. The Heliari matron voice, Vashara, scorched but alive, demanded vengeance not just for her own wounded, but for the insult to their collective future. The Krell archivist, pulled from wreckage by Arya's own hands, called the Urek an anomaly of uncontained entropy, a threat to all order. The Talaran, whose voices had once trembled with grief, now whispered as one in her mind. We will not let it burn again. The Urek had made a mistake. In trying to kill diplomacy, they had proven its necessity, but uniting minds was not the same as uniting action. Trust between the Krell, Heliari, and Talaran was brittle-held. Together by little more than Arya's relentless resolve, if they were to move forward, they would need something stronger than hope. They needed to stand together, and so Arya proposed something unheard of since the collapse, a second summit. This time, not on a vulnerable moon, but aboard a drifting ancient relic, the Sanctum 5. Sanctum 5 was a derelict Concord arbitration station, once located at the center of a now-forgotten diplomatic zone. After the war, it had fallen dark, left to spin among asteroid fragments and stellar dust. Its systems were offline. Its chambers were silent. But Arya had a plan. With Krail engineers, Kellyari energy cores, and Talaran structural harmonics, the station was repaired. The cooperation itself was groundbreaking. Krell drones shared their schematics, Heliori fleet flares powered the engines, and Talaran psionic conduits aligned the station's gravitic field. It wasn't smooth.
Ow.
Every step was marred with disagreement, suspicion, and near sabotage. But they worked together, and Sanctum 5 came alive. Flickering lights once meant for Concord tribunals blinked again. Halls designed for interspecies dialogue echoed with voices long silenced. The great chamber round, with no central position of power, was restored to functionality. It was a ghost of the old Concord, and a birthplace for something new. Arya didn't propose a resurrection of the past. Instead, she presented a new vision, a federation of broken worlds. Not a galactic government, but a coalition of equal powers. One where the trauma of the past was not erased, but acknowledged and honored. Where diversity wasn't just tolerated, it was the very foundation of their survival. Each species would maintain full autonomy, but trade, security, and cultural exchange would be overseen by shared protocols. Emergency defense networks would activate if any one member was attacked. And all species would have access to joint research, peacekeeping, rebuilding programs. Her proposal was bold and fragile. The Krell feared unpredictability. The Heliari hated bureaucracy. The Talaran questioned if the damage done was too deep to heal, but then something unexpected happened. The youngest Krell diplomat, Lectorine, took the floor and removed his data mask, a gesture of vulnerability. We were archivists, he said. But what good are records if no one lives to read them? A Heliari fleet lieutenant stepped forward. She spoke of her ancestors lost in the collapse. Now through the summit's work, she had heard a Krell voice for the first time in her life, and understood it. And finally, the Talaran delegation, often silent and spectral, released a psionic vision into the room. It was a memory, shared to all, a vision of the Accord's last days, chaos, fear, betrayal land then. Arya, stepping into the fire. Alone, she came without war, they said. So we may stand without fear, and then one by one they signed. The Treaty of Sanctum was born. Even as they signed the documents, alarms blared. The Urek fleet had returned this time, with more ships, more weapons, and a message. There will be no unity, only ashes. But what they didn't expect was that this time, the stars did not stand alone. The Heliari activated their war fleets not as lone clans, but as united firestorms. Krell algorithms coordinated planetary shields and fleet formations in real time, and the Talaran unleashed a psychic web that scrambled. Urek targeting systems and destabilized their drives, and at the heart of it all, Arya, the Vigil's reach had no weapons, but it had the highest comes priority. Arya became the voice of the battlefield, coordinating across species, translating, advising, reminding them all, you are not fighting each other anymore. You are fighting for each other. The battle raged for hours, but unity turned the tide. The Urek were driven back into the void, and for the first time in generations, peace had defenders. The Battle of Sanctum V became more than a military victory. It was a turning point in galactic history. For the first time in over a century, three major civilizations had not only communicated, but fought side by side, driven not by desperation or conquest, but by choice. The Urek assault, meant to crush the fragile alliance before it could take root, had instead forged something stronger than anyone imagined, and at the center of it all stood Captain Arya Voss, her name once dismissed, as that of an idealist chasing ghosts, now echoed through the stars, not as a war hero, not as a conqueror, but as a symbol of what unity could be. In the months that followed, the newly signed Treaty of Sanctum held firm. The Krell, the Heliari, and the Talaran began to exchange envoys, knowledge, and even infrastructure. Joint patrols formed in border zones, not to control territory, but to monitor for remnants of the Urek warbands. Worlds once hostile to each other began tentative dialogue. A federation began to form, not a revival of the old Concord, but something smaller, more personal. Grounded in trust, not bureaucracy. Guided by principles, not protocol. And it bore a new name, the Accord of the Fractured Star. Its emblem was simple. Three intersecting lines around a single point of light. That light was Arya. She refused any position of power. The Council of Accord offered her a title Supreme Coordinator of Interstellar Peace. Earth offered her a hero's welcome, fleet of her own, and a permanent seat in the planetary government. She turned them all down. My job was never to lead, she said. It was to remind you what you'd forgotten. Instead, she returned to her ship vigils, reached now fully restored, not as a relic, but as a living academy. With backing from the Accord, she founded the Galactic Peace Corps, a training institution for diplomats, mediators, and cultural liaisons. Students came from every member species, Krell logic trainees, Heliari flame speakers, Talaran, empathy adepts, and even human idealists hoping to follow in her footsteps. She taught them not only history and negotiation, but how to listen, how to see the soul behind the words, how to bridge, not dominate. And always she reminded them, you don't need armies to change the galaxy. You need courage. You need presence. You need to show up when everyone else runs away. Legends grew around her. Some were true, how she negotiated a ceasefire between two asteroid clans with a single poem. How she pulled a bleeding Krell child from an escape pod drifting through solar fire. Her voice, through a static-ridden broadcast, stopped a Heliari capital ship from self-destructing during a psychic storm. Others were myths. That she had no fear because she was born without it. That she spoke all languages in her sleep. She could see time, She never corrected them, not because she believed them, but because she understood something deeply human. Hope wears many faces in sometimes. It needs a legend. In time, her ship grew quieter. Arya aged, though slowly, preserved by decades of medical advances. Her once black flight suit faded to gray, and her voice, though still sharp, softened. She stopped traveling as far. She began training others to take her place. Then, one day, without announcement or fanfare, Vigil's Reach entered silent orbit over Accord primed, the heart of the new alliance, and stopped transmitting. Inside, she was found in her quarters, peacefully asleep, her hand resting on an old datapad filled with Concord treaties and a child's drawing, a human, Krell, a Heliari, and a Tlarenol, holding hands under a star. Her heart had simply stopped. The galaxy did not mourn her with silence. Instead, it sang. Each planet sent a note. Every species spoke her name in their own tongue. Children lit beacon flares. Entire fleets flashed their lights in synchronized patterns across the void. Even the Talaran, who rarely expressed emotion, broadcasted a psionic wave that rippled. Through hyperspace, the one who came alone now walks with all of us. A monument was never built. Arya had asked there be none. Instead, the Vigil's Reach was placed in a glass cradle in low orbit above Accord Primate systems, permanently open, its logs available to all. Its halls a living museum and school. Above the entrance hangs only one inscription. She entered the void alone, united the stars. Her story became part of every child's first education, not as a tale of war or glory, but as a reminder of what one person, one human can do when they choose to believe that peace is worth the risk. Not every problem was solved. The galaxy remained complex. Conflicts still flared. New threats would come. But thanks to her, the stars were no longer silent. They were listening, because one woman dared to cross the void and speak.